Hey guys, Biosec here. Well, this is a really big subject. Sorry about that. And I almost on a daily basis talk to people almost on a daily basis that just seem to think that they are alone in their stress, basically, in a nutshell. And that is what I mean by nobody is special, meaning that there isn't just one person, if not very few, very few, if any, that go through certain type of stress alone, and they're the only person on the planet that has gone through this kind of stress, basically. Now, this stress, or should I say, predicament, could be something like, your parent died, or so how about something a little more extreme, like your parent killed themselves. Well, of course, this is most likely going to be shocking to, let's say, the child at hand and anybody that is engaged or with them or related, etc., are going to be shocked. And sometimes one or more of these people are going to go through the kind of stress where they go into the deepest and darkest part of their mind. And like I've stated before, this is a very hard position to get out of when you get into it. And at one point in my life, I was kind of at it myself for at least for a bit, but then kind of got right back out of it myself, and maybe from just talking to people. But let's say somebody gets to a point where they just, they get into that dark side, and not like myself, they decide not to talk to anybody about it. And the only times you ever hear them express themselves about it are when they get pissed off at somebody for talking about what's happened to them in their lives, and then they try to compare what they've gone through in their lives and act like they've gone through worse, and then get pissy at them. I mean, that's just, let's say, a general socialization issue, I would say. It is a person who is in conflict with what has happened to them in a recent and or even sometimes distant past that they have not come to terms with yet in their minds, and they are again just conflicted. And they do not know how to react to it so much, and so they lash out, per se. And again, I have seen this many times. Now, sometimes a person in this predicament might, let's say, go into taking drugs. And I'm not just talking about those guys that just do the marijuana or do the e-cigarette, not those types of people. I mean the people that do heroin, meth, the good shit. As I've heard some referred to. It's actually not the good shit. Never take that shit, by the way. But moving on from that. And the deal with taking drugs is that it doesn't actually help. I mean, you might feel, let's say, good momentarily, but the thing about taking drugs like that is that sometimes you're trying to keep that high. And then sometimes you kind of lose your development also when you take those types of drugs as well. And so sometimes you aren't really in the right mind when you're doing those types of drugs. And lots of times people tend to not really grow up. Their minds just stops growing. And I've seen many cases like this from some of the friends I've known throughout my life, per se, where it's like they're still 14 years old, even though they're like my age. They just don't really grow up, and they still are doing drugs, etc. And it gets in the way of your development, but also it could even get in the way of your identity. I've quite literally seen people who were hardworking, honest people, for years, and then one day they decided to start taking this stuff because they started feeling comfortable with it. And then next thing you know, they started missing days of work. They started calling in for a ton of sick days. Then next thing you know, the wife and the kids and them are starting to get into a lot of fights about shit that they aren't responsibly doing. And the next thing you know, they break up. And then years later, the person doesn't even know who the fuck they are. And they don't even recognize their wife and kids anymore, etc. This kind of stuff actually does happen sometimes. So before you ever take any of the big shit that you are not supposed to be taking, I would at the very least beforehand look into what the effects are, and especially I'd say even on the short term and long term of these drugs before you take them. I've also have no yeah, I have though seen some people take shrooms and acid before right in front of me plenty of times in the past. That's another big one that seems to be a thing that people take. It's not really as bad as like some of the other drugs that people take, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend people take that shit either. Nor would I even recommend people take marijuana. But I would say if you're gonna at least take any of them, I guess take that one. But and yes, I know marijuana isn't a drug. I know my druggy friends. Marijuana isn't a drug, it's a herb. So you guys can stop bitching at me about that. But just know, whether you're worried about being a virgin, I mean, come on, we all start out as virgins, and no offense, but being a virgin is a lot healthier than being a non-virgin. I'm virgin, yeah, not virgin per se. And I always try to teach younger adults and kids that, because it's so fucking stupid that there's people telling these kids that being a virgin is a problem, even though being a virgin, if anything, is actually better in lots of ways. I would actually, in some ways, rather be a virgin to this day than be a non-virgin, to be frank. And yeah, you guys have heard me talk about that before, so I guess I'll just also will move on from that. But anybody that's worried about that, you seriously just need to stop worrying about it, okay? Because I see tons of teenagers and kids to this day, and even young adults still worry about that shit, and it's so fucking stupid. Just fucking get over it and move on to more stressful things, I guess I might say, that are actually important. I mean, I've just seen the stupidest shit over and over again from these people, especially the people that start taking drugs. Oh my God. I've literally heard parties next door or not far away from my house of people just calling each other bitch and hoe and getting pissy at each other and getting into fights over name calling, over just a bunch of fucking name calling. They cannot keep their temper or keep their cool if somebody calls them a bitch or somebody calls them a hoe, etc. It is just so fucking stupid. I mean, I seriously don't know how these people live. It's like, and the whole time they are trying to, I would say, kind of keep that first high, as they call it. They're chasing the dragon, is what they're doing. They're trying to make it so that they're always, getting that first high that they got when they first became high. But of course, that first high, they can never achieve again. And even though they try to keep on getting that first high, it's like it just gets worse and worse and worse, because the thing is, when you do that, the mind loses its, I would say, will to keep itself, happy, to keep itself going. It then relies on the drug to keep on moving on instead of relying on itself, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And so every time, let's say, you're off the drug, your mind's just like, oh my God, I need a drug, And of course, that's when addiction happens. And then next thing you know, I mean, these people, they just never get off these drugs sometimes. Some of them do, but some of them don't. And then some of them will try to go to these places sometimes being like, oh, I need help. But then they'll try to take advantage of the benefits that they get at these places. And then they go back to getting into drugs and their lifestyle until their money runs out again, and then they try to act like they need help again. I mean, it's just a fucking mess, per se. And I wouldn't necessarily try to compare what you've been through with other people so much. I mean, there are definitely times when I'll see kids in, let's say, high school movies and shows, and you know, let's say the types of stress, quote unquote, that they go through in these movies. And I've got to say, it's very soft core compared to what I went through when I went through high school. I don't know about you guys, at least most of the time. But then they also will put shit in these high school movies and kids shows that don't ever happen in high school. I mean, per se, like, I always thought it was funny how these kids would always lie about how much they get laid, and some of them would always like, oh, I get laid every day. Oh, see that girl over there? I had sex with her. Oh, look at that girl over there. I had sex with her too. It's like, yeah, whatever. Hardly anybody is even having sex at high school. Now, the only high schools are that are where people are legitimately having, like, I would say, that kind of sex, are the kind of high schools that you don't want to go to. Take it from me. Because what that means is that high school is full of druggies. Those are the only types of people that are legitimately having that kind of sex. You do not want to be hanging around those types of people. Trust me. But just know, whether you're transgender or whether you're not transgender, or whether you're a virgin, or whether you're going through whatever you're going through in life, just know that there are also people that go through the same types of stresses that you've been through. And also keep in mind, try not to, I would say, compare so much your life with others and push them away like that. Because when you start doing that, that's when the real issues start coming in, actually. And another thing to consider, life, in a sense, when it comes to stress and shit happening to you, it's never going to stop. And you are just going to have to overcome that fact that things in your life are just going to keep on happening. Whether it's another parent that's going to die, or both of your parents die eventually as you get older. And again, that's just one, I would say, common thing that you're going to have to overcome, that everybody goes through, is both your parents dying. That is just something that you're going to have to overcome. You're going to have to move on from your parents and move on with your own life, your own kids, etc. And that's just how life is. And next thing you know, your knees start to break out, your hip starts to break out, you start to get old, and that's just another thing that you're going to have to overcome as you get older, is that your body is going to stop functioning, and then when after that isn't fun enough, then your mind is going to start going. And of course, that's probably the scariest part, at least to me, is, seeing relatives of my own going through Alzheimer's, which is a very real thing, and or dementia, etc. And again, those are just things that we are going to have to overcome. You're going to have to stop, worrying about the little bullshit things that you grew up with in high school and other stupid ass bullshit things. And you're going to have to, and then eventually you're going to realize that those things do not even fucking matter, especially in comparison to the things that actually do matter. Like, for instance, one thing that I've definitely learned over time is that, sometimes I also need to talk with other younger adults to help prepare them for harsh reality. Just like I'm doing right now. And that, to me, is something that matters. And it is something that I feel that a lot of kids these days are not getting prepared for. Even when I was a kid, in some areas, I wasn't being properly prepared. And so especially when it was the recession, when I got out of high school, that didn't exactly make things easy. and nor did the grown-ups exactly make it easier for my generation to get a job, which was, in my opinion, very fucking selfish. The entire fucking time. And then they told me and my whole generation that the best thing that we could do is go to college. Now, not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing to do. In fact, it's a good thing to do. But the way that they were going about it was to say that that was the only option. And so when we all went to college and got our degrees, suddenly too many people were going to college, for one. And two, we were all in fucking major debt from paying tens of thousands of dollars for a class that didn't teach us how to do jack shit. And then once we tried getting these jobs, we had to be very competitive at getting these jobs, not to mention all the jobs that went down and weren't around anymore because of the recession. And then we had to overcome that. And then what I had to personally do was that I pretty much had to just get any job that I could possibly get. And that, again, was a stress, but it's not like I was also going through it alone. The average person at my age was going through something along those lines, where we pretty much had to eventually just get any job that we could get, instead of going towards the job that we wanted. Now, nowadays, this issue has been kind of, moved over, and now we have overcome it and moved on these issues. And that's the thing, is that we need to come to terms that bad things have happened to us. But you see, that's not the important thing. The important thing is, that for one, we have overcome it and moved on. And two, we have our family members and our besties, our friends who are in support of us, and that we should not push away just because something bad happened to us, nor should you push anybody else away because of it. And three, you need to get over it. Which I pretty much have to this day. Just get over these issues. And it takes a bit, but it eventually does happen, and then next thing you know, it's like you're almost rarely ever stressed out. I mean, another thing that I tend to have to go through is like people saying shit like I'm antisocial because I'm introverted. And sometimes I can't get a job because of it. It's like, oh, we think you're antisocial and won't say something if something bad happens to us. It's like, oh yeah, well, when's that happened? It's like, oh, it's never happened. It's like, okay, so yeah, so then why are you guys getting rid of me? So that is like, well, we're just gonna get rid of you anyway, even though you've done nothing wrong. And it's just like, oh my fucking God. It's just like you guys are just breaking your own fucking rules sometimes, you know what I mean? And that's something that I've had to go through throughout my life is, just people being too judgmental of me on that regard. And they will just throw me under the bus like that, so to speak, just because they, for just whatever reason, don't like me. But again, that's something that also a lot of other people go through. That's not something that I just go through personally. And yes, again, just because I'm introverted does not make me antisocial. That's just fucking stupid. And with that being said, I will end this conversation and video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.